You are listening to a pleasure podcast. For more from our sex podcast collective, visit pleasurepodcasts.com.
Welcome to American Sex, the award-winning podcast dedicated to challenging those puritanical, backward-ass ideals that we have in the U.S. I'm Sunny Megatron, and my co-host is Ken Melvoin Berg. We're sexuality educators, pleasure advocates, and ridiculous, sadistic kinksters. We're also non-monogamously married to each other. So strap in or strap one on. In this house, your pleasure is power. Your kink is customizable. And your subversive perversions are revolutionary. Welcome, friends, to episode 199 of American Sex Podcast. I know you missed me and my sound effects during our winter hiatus, but we are back this week talking about grooming within BDSM with me. I am your guest this week. Now, when we hear the word grooming, we often think of children or other vulnerable populations that are susceptible to this. But grooming actually happens a lot more than we realize, even among adults. And it can happen in really subtle ways and in any kind of relationship, romantic, friendship, employee relationships, etc. And here's the thing. If we're already bad at recognizing grooming in vanilla contexts, things get even more complicated when we add kink to the mix. This kind of behavior within the kink world can hide in plain sight. Well, why? So in kink, it's normal and in many cases expected to spotlight authoritative control and lean into very unbalanced power dynamics that at face value might seem oppressive and exploitative. And a lot of us find that incredibly hot. That's why we're doing kink. But this blurry line between fantasy power imbalance and the non-kink default world power imbalance is confusing. And it can make it really hard for us, whether we are new to kink or experienced lifestylers, to tell the difference. So some of what you're going to get out of this episode, how abusive power dynamics can exist in kink relationships, the 6 stages of grooming and how they apply to DS dynamics, understanding the end goal from the groomer's point of view, how pop culture kink stereotypes can fuel grooming within BDSM communities and dynamics, how my Breakable rules analysis can help you spot unhealthy kink in your own life, and how using my concept of multidimensional kink can help you gut check situations and behaviors, sometimes even your own. And I know you haven't started note-taking yet if you're a geeky note-taker like me, but there is one thing I want you to remember, kind of a general rule of thumb when you are looking for this in your own BDSM relationships and your community, etc. It's really important to understand the difference between these 3 things. 1, that fantasy role play power imbalance, like I'm the dom and you're the sub and yes, then the consensually and mutually beneficial leader-follower relationship, like we see in a lot of 24/7 DS dynamics, right? Understand the difference between those things and unhealthy, oppressive, abusive power dynamics that can show up in kink. That's what we're all kind of collectively having a problem discerning because, lots of reasons. We'll get into it in the episode, but I did want to give you a quick content note. Now, while I discuss grooming within adult relationships within this episode, I do want to make it clear that there are similarities between adult grooming and childhood grooming. So while I won't be going into detail about it, I do briefly reference childhood grooming a couple of times during this conversation or monologue, because it's just me. I also get into some detail about coercive control and emotional abuse in the context of romantic relationships too. So I want to give you the heads up so that you know what to expect and you can listen when you're in the right headspace. Because at the end of the day, taking care of you is the most important thing. Now, before we get to that, I've got a little housekeeping, or as we like to say here on American Sex, let's wash the balls. So yeah, that's a sound effect too. You love my squeaky clean ball sound effect. I need like a Anyway, why are we washing the balls? Because soaping up the twins is a much more fitting metaphor for our subject matter here than scrubbing the baseboards, you know? I mean, I guess unless you have like a domestic service kink, I suppose, then, you know, whatever. You do you, right? Kink is customizable. Anyway, first thing I want to ask you is, did you get your free ticket to the Dom Sub Virtual Summit yet? You need to hurry. It starts on Monday, February 20th, and it spans for 5 whole days. And you know how hard it is to find quality BDSM education. You know, the DS Summit features more than 15 experts giving classes on everything from communication to scene building to crafting contracts and agreements, kink and disability, and a whole bunch more. I'm going to be teaching my no BS approach to consent and safe words on the 23rd. And those tickets, like I said, they are free and they include access to a private online community where you can talk to other attendees about what you're learning. So, and also that community's been online for a couple of weeks. I'm telling you, it is hopping. It is great. So the ticket link is in our episode description, or you can go straight to bit.ly, / this is all one word, small letters, Sunny DS Summit. And that's how you can get your free ticket. So speaking of the episode description, that's also where you'll find all sorts of different links from the resources that I reference in today's episode to discounts, to this episode's sponsors, to our Patreon page, access to our free Discord community, and the link to my free kink negotiation mini workbook. So make sure you check all that out. And during our sponsor breaks, you're also going to be hearing trailers for a couple of podcasts that are in our network, which is called Pleasure Podcast. This week, I recommend checking out Shameless Sex and Sex Talk with My Mom. Those are 2 hit shows that you don't want to miss. And of course, there'll be links to those shows in the show notes too. Last thing, if you haven't checked out zippermagazine.com, what are you waiting for? Zipper Magazine is an online magazine about kink education, community, and culture, and I am the editor-in-chief. And while the podcast has been on hiatus, there's been so much great content that's gone up on zippermagazine.com and our YouTube channel and, social media and stuff. There's Midori's BDSM travel guide and the history of kink in Japan. Getting the most out of electric wand play. We also had a giveaway. You missed that. So you got to pay attention. Someone got a neon wand kit and a power tripper, and it was amazing. There's also like a deep dive on munches, the psychology behind Santa fetish, like lots and lots of stuff. I'll leave the link, you know where, right? Episode description, aka the show notes. But I'll leave a link to a couple of articles that I think are pretty relevant to the conversation we're about to have about grooming and manipulation and emotional abuse within BDSM. So I have got a myth-busty piece that I wrote on, I actually wrote both of these. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but maybe I'm tooting my own horn. It is a safe words and consent deep dive that's very relevant. Also, another that explores the very vast differences between trad wives. Now that stands for traditional wife, and it's an identity that has grown in popularity exponentially on the internet, and one that on the surface can seem very kink friendly, very kink like, can entice people who are interested in kink. So this piece is the difference between a trad wife and a domestic service sub in BDSM, or AKA like someone with a 1950s housewife fetish, because you need to know the difference. Trad wives are not, there's like ties to the alt-right. It's some shit. It really is. But online, like, just if you're doing a drive-by, it looks a lot like kink, but it's not. So you need to know about it. Anyway, that's it. We're done. We're going to get on to stuff. These balls, my friends, American fuckers, are clean. I don't know. Was I the little lady from Poltergeist? Maybe I was. On that note, let's dive into grooming within BDSM relationships. So this is one of those episodes that's going to be kind of like a conversation, like my BDSM freestyle episodes. But this one is about one particular subject, grooming. And why grooming? Well, if you have been following me for a while, you may notice I'm a little seat of my pants, or maybe you haven't noticed. Maybe I play it off really well, but I am. I don't plan way in advance, like, oh yeah, in April, I'm going to talk about this, or in, October, I'm going to, like, for instance, people who plan their social media posts months out, I don't understand. I cannot get into the Halloween headspace and like write a social media post about Halloween if it's like August 22nd, right? And I'm kind of the same way with a lot of these freestyle episodes, and really a lot of stuff in my life. I'm just seating my pants. That's the way it works. But, I also, I don't know if things happen for a reason, but I do notice there's like some synergies sometimes, or maybe things just happen and coincidences happen and we make reasons out of them later. But what has happened to me over the last few months is the subject of grooming within the context of BDSM has come up repeatedly, like it's banging me over the head with a brick. And then I realized, like, whoa, I just had this, like, I need to talk about grooming. So here we are. Well, why? Grooming happens a lot in a lot of different contexts, but usually as adults, we're like, well, I'm an adult. I'm not going to be susceptible to grooming. Isn't that the thing we talk about? Like when children are being abused, if an adult befriends them, they keep secret, that sort of thing. I'm a grown up, like I am a grown ass 40, 50, 30, 20, whatever year old person. I know what's going on. I'm not susceptible to grooming. We all are. We all are in many, many different contexts, whether it's romantic relationships, sometimes work relationships, any kind of exploitative relationship where there's some sort of power imbalance. Now, I got to give you a disclaimer. I am not a therapist. I am not a trained or licensed mental health professional. Granted, yes, I work with a lot of therapists and mental health professionals, so I'm adjacent to that world. And, maybe I know a little more than your average armchair, whatever. But take what I'm saying with, maybe not just one grain of salt, a few grains of salt, right? But with everything, what I'm hoping this is this plants a little seed or spark, if this is something that you've recognized in your life, and make you pause and go, wait a minute, and then look further into this. Don't just be like, well, Sonny Megatron says, and I am no end all be all. Okay. I light the spark and then go make a fire and learn more. Let this be your inspiration. So what is grooming? Grooming is a way that somebody slowly normalizes an abnormal relationship to the point where the other person doesn't really know that something's funky. We're all familiar with like the terms gaslighting and all of those things. Coercive control, that's another one. And when I say abuser or target, I want to make something clear, first of all. When people are abusers, like good people can abuse, right? Like people are not one-sided, like you're either all good or you're all bad. People are really complex. And that's how, a lot of abusive people get to move about the world, is because in so many other contexts, they're really great people. Or they seem like really great people, whatever, it's all different types. Also, not all abusers are these sinister, like evil, supervillains that have this big plan, like, oh, first I'm going to love bomb. Then, no, oftentimes this happens and the abuser doesn't really realize that they're abusers. So I just want to make sure that we're seeing that through that lens. Like, this is real complex. Again, I'm not a psychiatrist, a therapist, etc., but this goes deep. It's not black and white. Like, nothing is black and white. Nothing's good or bad or whatever. Everything has lots of layers of complexity and nuance. And in this instance, that's really key to see, because a lot of times, I know, and I'm speaking, a lot of this is from personal experience. I've lived a life, y'all. I've had some things. I've had some relationships. Oh my God, it's a lot. But I got, I guess, fooled or taken or whatever word, because I thought, from everything I've learned from society and my friends and people talking, well, if somebody was a bad person or somebody was abusive, they would obviously be a bad person. And this person is so genuine and nice and, sincere in a lot of ways from their heart. And they don't believe that they're an abuser. So I was like, so they can't be an abuser. And it's complex. It is complex. Just throwing that out there. So gaslighting is when the abuser makes the target feel as if their reality isn't their reality. And we throw the word gaslighting around to mean all these things that it's not. And it's a very specific, maybe I did something, I don't know. Hey, I thought I washed the dishes. How come this is a weird example, but it's the only thing I can think of. I thought I washed the dishes and now they're dirty. Didn't I? No, you didn't. You didn't wash it. I purposely know that I am telling you something that didn't happen to alter your reality to my advantage. So coercive control. It is, and I'm pulling generic definitions off the internet, right? Just to be concise. And I will put in the show notes some of the articles that I've pulled. And as you'll see, some of the, the steps of grooming are pretty universal. You can pull up a dozen articles and they're all going to give you the same sort of steps. But coercive control has been defined as a pattern of controlling behaviors that create an unequal power dynamic in a relationship. These behaviors give the perpetrator power over their partner, making it difficult for them to leave. Sometimes coercive control can escalate to physical abuse. However, when it doesn't escalate, coercive control is emotional abuse that can cause psychological trauma. So why are we talking about grooming and these sorts of things in BDSM relationships? It's because the way BDSM relationships are configured, and because a lot of people who are maybe new to BDSM or they don't have great boundary setting skills, they have some of their own work to do that makes them easy targets for manipulation. And again, not that anyone is ever responsible or it's their fault because they were targeted or abused, right? This is oftentimes what people who are abusive, whether those people realize they're abusers or not, are looking for. So why did this come up for me? Number of reasons. One of them was the BDSM test episode that I did with Midori and Joe Zarate Sanderlin, the kinky therapist. It was in June, I think, of 2022, and I'll put the link in the show notes. That brought up a lot of groomy feelings And for Ropecraft is a BDSM conference that concentrates on rope bondage. They are doing a virtual winter class series. So we did a screening of that episode podcast and then talked to folks about the questions of the BDSM.org test. We don't like that test. If this is the first you're hearing about it, go listen to that episode. And one of the things about the BDSM test is it seemed very groomy to all three of us. And that's some of the examples are a lot of the questions were, would you, if you found the perfect BDSM relationship of your dreams, sell all of your possessions and move across the country to be your master sex slave? And there were just a lot of questions like that where I'm like, this keeps coming up. Like, whoever wrote these questions, it feels like they had an agenda, right? So that's one of the major things that brought it up. And I did a conference recently for therapists and mental health professionals where a lot of abuse within BDSM and how to tell the difference between an abusive relationship that is also one that includes BDSM versus just a BDSM relationship that isn't unhealthy, like how somebody, whether they're in that relationship or someone looking from the outside, can tell the difference. Because oftentimes they look the same from the outside looking in, and therein lies the problem. To somebody who is new, who doesn't know these things or doesn't have these skills to be very autonomous in their boundaries, you can't tell the difference between what's unhealthy and what's healthy, or at least it's difficult to. And I'm going to go with the classic example, right? I'm going to go with the stereotype, although this can happen in any kind of relationship. A dominant can be groomed and manipulated by a submissive. It doesn't matter the gender. It can happen to anybody. I'm going to use the example of what I tend to see the most often and my own lived experience as a person who is a femme, a woman, etc., and as somebody who started out as a submissive in BDSM, and really looking back at my life, someone who before I admitted I was kinky or started acting on it was probably living out some of my BDSM inclinations to play with power imbalance and oppressive situations and relationships. And it's fine to eroticize those. And I think what I was doing is really I was trying to eroticize those, but I actually ended up just walking right into those in my everyday life and not in a play way. And that was a disaster. So when you are a new submissive, and let's say you are somebody who is not a cis male person, right? There's a couple things going on. One, frenzy. Oh my goodness, frenzy. When you first learn about BDSM and maybe you are going out on dating sites and starting to meet people, or you're going to your local munches or your community events, or whatever you're doing, you're like a kid in a candy store, right? It is like, oh my goodness, it is so cool. It is so overwhelming. Heavens forbid, like me, if you're, neurodivergent, so you really like, this is my new identity now. And you like hyper focus on everything BDSM for like months and months straight. Yeah, your head's in a different world because you're so excited, right? It's also a big life milestone when, let's say you have, come from a sex negative environment, which really most of us have because we live in the United States, right? Even if our close circle is very open-minded and sex positive, we still have that sex negative influence. Our systems here, I'm not going to get into but I've talked about it all, patriarchy, capitalism, all of that, all the oppressive stuff, racism, all the isms, right? Rely on control, rely on dehumanizing people, reducing them to a very like, they're good, they're bad, they're this, they're that, very simple state. And a lot of that is fueled by shame. We live in a culture that controls us with shame. So especially for women, it's like, oh my, we're too prudish. Oh, we're such sluts. We're wearing too much makeup. We're not wearing enough makeup. Like we can never be the right thing. Right. And so that's why I'm talking about this from my experience, because I grew up socialized as a woman. So I had to deal with all of those things. Right. And then when I got into dating relationships and was going for a power exchange dynamic, but wasn't kinky yet, which, you know, was just a very unhealthy relationship. All of that played in, right? So you're dealing with all of that. And for the first time, maybe you're like, oh, I'm going to shed all my shame. I'm going to learn to live authentically. You feel fucking amazing. Your life has changed, right? You are in that headspace of like, wow. So then you're dealing with the lack of knowledge. And this came up. I taught a media literacy course for like therapists and care professionals. I think I'm going to roll it out to like y'all too. I'm going to do a version of it, but it's really hard to find information, good information about kink and BDSM online, in books, etc., for a whole lot of reasons. And there's so much BDSM misinformation out there, to the point like the BDSM.org test, which if you're reading that and you think, well, everyone takes the BDSM.org test, everyone has it on their FetLife profiles. I'm 86% submissive and 42% primal and, you know, whatever. It must be legit, right? It doesn't matter that half the questions are like, would you give up everything to be a sex slave? To, you know, it's like, oh my God. So that's normalizing this really unhealthy stuff. And it looks like, well, that's an educational thing. These are our foundations, right? Everyone I met at the munch or when I joined FetLife said, well, the first thing you got to do is take that BDSM.org test. So we're already starting off on a really, you know, shaky ground. So then there's the normalization of control that happens in the process of grooming very slowly. And we're going to get into the steps of grooming in a minute, but very slowly, the control that one partner has over the other that is very imbalanced is very slowly normalized. So it seems like nothing's happening. Now, because in BDSM, we are often playing out in a fantasy role play sense what in the real world would be an unbalanced, unhealthy relationship, it's really easy to conflate, wait, is this real? Or is this like my BDSM dynamic, right? And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So I have this concept of multi-dimensional kink, which I know is going to illuminate what I'm talking about. So this is really helpful to keep in mind, whether you're new to kink, whether you've been doing it for 20 years, and especially when you are negotiating, when you are establishing boundaries with partners, especially if you are that person who is in the dynamic, the S type, who is going to be on the bottom end of that unbalanced power that you're playing out in your kink relationship. Think of yourself as existing in two dimensions. There's like two of you that exist at one time. And maybe this is kind of the matrix, like do whatever analogy you want in your head, right? It could be parallel universe. I don't know, whatever, right? So you have your play persona, which is the person you are when you're in your dynamic. So if I'm a submissive, that is when I'm submissive. That is when I play by the rules. Like if our rule is like, I don't question my dominant, or I don't blah, 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 whatever. Cool. That's when I play by those rules, right? And then we have another self, which is our autonomous neutral self. And that's just who you are. not submissive, not playing by these unbalanced power dynamics. And that is who you are when you negotiate, right? When you are talking about your wants and your dislikes and your limits and your boundaries and all of that stuff. You cannot do it from a place of in play, like in that play container. You can't do it from a headspace of being in your play dynamic, because then you cannot be autonomous and stand the fuck up for yourself, right? So when I say you have these two selves, you have your autonomous self that is there at all times. You have your kinky self that is there at all times, right? And when you are in play, and when I say play, I'm not trying to trivialize kink. A lot of people, especially those who are in like 24/7 dynamics, they hear people call what we do play, and they're like, play is what children do. That is trivializing it. No. Kink is customizable. That is my, catchphrase. I will shout it from the rooftops. But when we are in our kink space, we are in very compartmentalized roles that have a very certain protocol, a very certain set of rules. There are things that we can do and we can't do. And I'm talking either if you're a dominant or a submissive, right? And that's what I mean when I say play. You are in that container of kink, right? And let's say I'm a submissive. I have my play self is in the driver's seat, doing all the things, abiding by all the submissive agreements that I agreed to when we negotiated, right? But my autonomous self is always present. And my autonomous self is sitting in the back seat, like a backseat driver, watching everything. Are you tired of takeout and fast food? But at the same time, it still seems like a better option than going through the hassle of putting together healthy and convenient meals. I got it. I have been there a lot. And let me tell you about the #1 meal kit for eating well, Green Chef. They make it super easy to eat well with plans to fit every single way of eating, whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, gluten-free, or you're just looking to eat a little better. Green Chef has got you. Now, Ken is vegetarian and I eat gluten-free. Plus, if you've been following my health journey, you know I've developed these weird sensitivities to processed ingredients that are common in a lot of grocery store foods. And I gotta tell you, I was so impressed with Green Chef. Not only were the ingredients incredibly fresh, the quality's top-notch. And you know how I know? Because I felt great after every meal. And they were so easy to cook and delicious. I also really appreciate the variety and customization that Green Chef has too. With over 30 recipes to choose from, each week you can mix and match meals from different dietary preferences in the same box without changing your plan. They also offer nutritious 10-minute lunch recipes that are easy to eat on the go. I know you're curious, right? And you know I've got the hookup too. So go to greenchef.com/sunny60 and use the code sunny60 to get 60% off plus free shipping. Now that's SUNNY60. Yes, you heard me right. 60% off plus free shipping when you use the code sunny60 at greenchef.com/sunny60. As we head into the bustling new year, it is easy to get caught up in helping others and forget about yourself. But you can't pour from an empty cup. You gotta check in with yourself first. If you're tired, rest. And don't skimp out on saying yes to the things that make you feel good. How about this? Transporting your mind to a world where you can relax and indulge in your deepest desires with Dipsea. Dipsea is an app full of hundreds of short, sexy audio stories that bring scenarios to life with immersive soundscapes and realistic characters. Lose yourself in tales of an unexpected office fling. How about a steamy summer affair or a tantalizing, kinky one-night stand? Dipsea has stories for straight and queer listeners, told by a diverse range of voice actors. More than half are voiced by people of color. And you'll get to discover a new side to your favorite celebrities with stories voiced by Sharonis J. Jackson, ER Fightmaster, and Luke Cook. Dipsy offers sleep stories, wellness sessions, and sexy stories you can read too. So you have a variety of ways to spice up your me time, explore your desires, or heat things up with a partner. And with new content released every week, there is always something new to discover. For listeners of American Sex Podcast, Dipsy is offering an extended 30-day free trial when you go to dipsystories.com/sunny, SUNNY. That's 30 days of full access for free. Just go to DIPSEA stories.com/sunny. That's dipsystories.com/sunny. And my autonomous self is sitting in the back seat, like a backseat driver, watching everything. So if I don't know, my car starts to go out of control or there's, something in the road and I don't see it, my autonomous self is always watching. It can grab the wheel and go, whoa, you're going to hit that raccoon in the road. Or, hey, you have to safe word because you're about to hit a PTSD trigger or something's not right or whatever. So a lot of times when we get into kink, and I especially see this in new folks who are an S-types who really are they have wanted to unleash this part of themselves their whole lives, and it feels so good. They throw their autonomous selves in the garbage and think that part of them doesn't exist. And that makes it really difficult to be whoa, hey, wait a minute. Something's happening that's not cool here. Time out, safe word, whatever it is, right? So think about when you're doing kink, those two dimensions, and we all have them, whether we're dominant, whether we're submissive, D-types, S-types, doesn't matter, right? We got our play self. Sometimes we put that forward. Sometimes we got to pull that play self back and put our autonomous self forward. So keep that in mind. Groomers take advantage of the fact, again, whether they consciously realize they're doing it or not, of the fact that we feel when we're new at kink, or even when we're not new at kink, like we are just our play selves. Submissive is part of my identity, right? This is who I am. For some people, it's more of a leisure activity and it's something they take on and off like a sweater. And for other people, it's no, I'm fucking submissive all the time. This is who I am. And even if it's who you are, and even if it's your identity all the time, you still have that autonomous self sitting in the back seat waiting. So keep that in mind. That is one thing that groomers can take advantage of, right? Those boundaries end up getting blurred. The selves end up getting blurred, right? The normalization of control, it's perfectly fine to have really intense control or unbalanced control in a consensually negotiated container. But when that spills over into other areas and that spills over into control over the autonomous part of ourselves or control over areas of our life that we're this is not the kink area of my life. You can't control, whatever it is. That's when we've got a problem. So why do people groom? I keep stressing it's not always calculated. And I think that's a big kind of collective misstep that we all have when we try to conceptualize what is an abuser, or we try to wrap our heads around when we find out someone in our community or one of our friends or somebody that it's what? I can't even imagine that person doing this. What I know of them, they are so great. And they can still be abusers though. And oftentimes people will knee-jerk reaction to but my friend is so awesome, there's no way. And then that's no good for anyone. It's we need to accept that some people can be really great in some respects and really horrible all at the same time. And sometimes those people don't even know they're really horrible. So it could just be for the control. It feels good. It feels, and again, I'm not a mental health professional, but there could be all sorts of reasons, some sort of narcissistic tendencies, unhealthy coping mechanisms. Maybe that person is, not very emotionally adept, or they're kind of emotionally underdeveloped, right? And they're looking to push their negative feelings or their trauma or whatever on, like, to lash out at somebody else, right? Maybe it's an ego boost to be like, I have a sex slave that will do anything I want, and they quit their job and moved across the country to be my sex slave, or whatever it is, right? Sometimes it is for more obvious exploitation, like pushing that partner into doing sex work, or, more what we would generally think of as like, well, this is what adult grooming is, right? Isn't it like someone, who is subtly luring you into sex trafficking or something like that? Absolutely, that can be, but that's not the only thing. And it's really, really hard to tell the difference, as I said, between, are we playing what looks like an abusive dynamic, but it's all consensual and we're doing it with intention and we know what's behind it and we can stop and talk, and I can put my autonomous self forward when something is like going a little off the rails, and I know that you will then respond and be like, oh shit, and then we'll talk about it and everything will be good and we'll work it out, or not. It's hard to tell from the outside looking in, and sometimes it's hard to tell from the inside looking in. I often say in kink, it's not what we do, but it is how, not even how we do it, but the intention behind why we're doing it. So now I am going to talk about cis male doms. I often say that in kink, what we are doing, whether we realize it or not, we are perverting social norms and hierarchies, consensually perverting social norms and hierarchies for our pleasure. And what exactly do I mean by that? Think of your stereotypical, and again, I'm just leaning into the stereotypes, but don't think that's all relationships, please. Stereotypical relationship. Let's say you are a 1950s housewife. And this is a huge, like, internal battle between a lot of hetero cis women who are like, but I'm supposed to be a feminist, and I know that, like, having a man push me around is wrong, and blah, 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 blah. But, like, there is something about it in the context of kink or sex that is so fucking hot. And even though I am absolutely a feminist, and, maybe I'm even like an activist in my day-to-day default life, right? Like, I am like really feminist. In the bedroom or at home, I want to put on a little frilly apron and make my husband or whatever dinner and act like a 1950s housewife. And why? Why do I do that? That doesn't make sense. First of all, you're not abnormal. We tend to eroticize things that in other circumstances we're like, hell no. But at the right time, in the right context, we're like, oh my God, that's so hot, but it's so wrong. And why? So when I say we pervert social norms and hierarchies for our pleasure, think about that stereotypical 1950s housewife and like a domineering, authoritarian male dom. We are putting these very traditional, prescriptive, awful gender roles that our society has upheld. We're like putting them under a microscope, and we're taking certain qualities from those archetypes and we're putting them on like hyperdrive. We're amplifying them to like a cartoonish level. And we're being very one-dimensional with it. Like we're not the complete three-dimensional 1950s housewife that really existed in 1957 or whatever. But we are like play acting and really punching up some of those characteristics, right, to a unrealistic degree, because that's fun. So that's what I mean when I say we pervert social norms and hierarchies for our pleasure. We tend to play with things that are taboo. We tend to get turned on by things that it's like, I know I shouldn't be turned on by this, right? We tend to reconcile the power dynamics that we see in the world that we live in And we don't have to know that we're doing this, or we don't have to know why we're doing this. Like a lot of people, when they start thinking this deeply about it, they're like, fuck, this is a turn off. Like, it's just hot. Can I just leave it? It's just hot. I don't want to psychoanalyze myself. This is not sexy. And you don't have to psychoanalyze yourself. Some people are just BDSM geeks and they're like, oh my God, my brain, cool, tell me more. But a lot of times this is what we're doing. And we dive into it to the point where we are like shifting our consciousness. We're going to subspace or top space or that sort of thing, right? So perverting social norms and hierarchies for our pleasure. Keep that in your mind. Okay. So this is all fitting in to BDSM and to the steps of grooming in a way that, ooh, that's a good fit, but a bad fit because it's a really good fit. So go on any website and look up like the stages of grooming. And it's very similar for adults versus children. It's pretty much the same sort of process. It's just the details are different, right? And so first it's like targeting the victim is the first stage of grooming. And again, I'll put some links of like some websites where I pulled up the stages. So you can, like, there's one like Oprah.com and Psychology Today and, all these. So the first stage of grooming is based on the abuser's like ease of access or the perceived vulnerability of their target. Okay, I'm new to BDSM. I have, been suppressed my whole life. I'm completely vulnerable because I don't know anything about this lifestyle. Maybe I'm going through this like emotional discovery with myself. There's lots and lots and lots of stuff, right? Maybe I just got out of an abusive relationship. Like actually when I got into kink, that was my thing. I was in some horrible relationships where I couldn't explore, even though I felt these feelings. So when I was finally free of those relationships, I was able to explore. Luckily, I did not encounter somebody who saw that as a vulnerability in me. But that's a common scenario for women or marginalized folks in general, basically people who are not cis men who are getting into kink. So then number 2 is the inappropriate relationship. So like, and I'm just going to read what this article says. The concept of power dynamics is often mentioned when discussing inappropriate relationships. In cases where the abuser is older, wealthier, better connected, the power differential is one of the aspects of the relationship that increases the vulnerability of the victim. So let's think about that. If we are in a DS or we're entering into a DS scenario, we are S types. We don't know about like the autonomous self versus the kink self. And let's say we get a message on FetLife or whatever. And the first message is like, well, hello, whatever, I don't know, baby girl or whatever. I am your master. You must call me sir. This is your task I want you to do. And we're getting this in an email. And we're like, oh, I've never done this before. This is like all the BDSM erotica I've been reading. This is what the dom does. And it's so fucking hot. And I'm finally here. Finally, someone's in my DMs. Okay, this is what's supposed to be happening. It's not what's supposed to be happening, but it's like nobody is telling us that. I'm telling you that. So that's why that's a red flag. You'll hear people say like red flag. If somebody approaches you, and again, it could be the other way around. If you're dominant and a submissive approaches you like, well, hello, sir, mistress, whatever your title is and blah, blah, blah. And it's like asserting that power dynamic onto you and you don't even fucking know each other. You haven't negotiated this. That is a red flag. So that happens a lot. And then we do have the power imbalance. And I've talked about this in a few episodes and I'll try to find what number episode. I'll put it in the show notes, but my consent model PASSM, PASSM. And I'm not going to go over it again, but it's basically like to examine within yourself if you consenting, because a lot of times if we're in these coercive controlling relationships and we're in, like, we've been groomed, we feel like we are giving consent. We feel like we are in a place of autonomy, but we are actually not. But we don't even recognize that within ourselves. So my possum model, which I'm working on some workbooks and I'm writing a book right now, it will be out for you with questions. Like, I'm hoping in a couple of months, so hang tight. But this model helps you examine, is the consent I'm giving really coming from an autonomous space? Or is there something influencing it, like power imbalance? Power imbalance. Well, first of all, you're a dominant. That's intimidating. Secondly, maybe you're experiencing BDSM and I've just entered the community. I don't know anything, right? We will also hear about, sad to say, community leaders being abusers. And it's like, cool, because yeah, you seem awesome because you teach classes. Everyone knows who you are. You've been in the community for like 10 years. You're a pillar of blah, 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 blah. There are lots of ways we can have power imbalance. We can, even if it's like white male doms who are older, it's usually you see people who are older who maybe have, they are higher on the privilege ladder for whatever reasons. And they're always dating 22-year-old AFAB, that's assigned female at birth, partners that are people of color. And they're very quiet. And you start to see a pattern. And that's not to say like, oh, if you're a middle-aged guy dating a younger femme person of color that you're an abuser. No, absolutely not. It's like red flags can stand alone sometimes and not be a red flag. It's patterns. It's like when they start running in herds like Jurassic Park, then it's like, oh, wait a minute. Okay. So if that's one red flag, that's like one to like keep your eye on. Like, well, I don't know. There may not be any other red flags. And maybe that is a legit situation. And the people in that situation where it is a red flag, they pass it off. Well, look at that person. Look at that couple, or look at that dynamic, or look at that polycule or whatever. There's an older guy and they're fine. Maybe they are fine, but it doesn't mean you are. So again, it's complex. Nothing is like black and white, bad or good, or, So next, I didn't talk about, I think I said I was going to talk about this, people who are higher on that privilege ladder. There's a question in one of the classes that I was teaching on one of the conferences a few weeks back of like, is it bad if, let's say, a white male dominant enjoys being a dominant? Is that coming from a bad place? Is that coming from a place of like, oh my God, I have all this privilege in my life and I can act kind of oppressive and shitty and not even know it, just because like that's how I've been groomed by society. And like men are victims of patriarchy too. I'm not saying men are bad. It's like the dynamics that society has set us up in, like it hurts us all. It hurts us all, maybe in different ways, but it hurts us all. So the question was like, should cis men who are dominant, have all this privilege, be dominant? Or is that inherently wrong? I'm going to go back to, it's not what you do. It's the intention you do it with. It's the place that it's coming from. So I could see two male dominants that act exactly the same. I wouldn't, and maybe one is like, man, so self-aware, so like just, and the other one is a horrible person. I would not be able to tell the difference. I might not even be able to tell the difference if I was that person submissive. Maybe not at first, and maybe not for a while if I was like also fooling myself kind of. And, I say the more privilege that you have, the more work you need to do. And that is especially true if the kink, role, or power dynamic or archetype that you embody is also one of privilege. So, white male doms, get on with your bad self. Like, have fun. but make sure you did the work. Make sure it's coming from a good place. Make sure you understand the power dynamics are at play and how they are received by your partner, who is not only marginalized and exploited in your consensual kink container or play headspace. Understand how that intersects with those same identities that they hold out in the real world, and that the damage that can be done if that's not done with care and intention, and the extra care and intention that you have to have going into those roles to make sure that whatever kink dynamic you're playing with this partner is also a positive experience for them. That's a big, tall order, and I'm not going to be able to tell you how to do it in like a 2-minute, thing. But no, that's what's on your plate. They say, do the work. That is the work. That's the work you have to do. I'm just going to come right out and say it. Credit scores are a bunch of BS. But you know what? No matter how much we think that, they still determine if you qualify for that apartment, if you can get a decent home loan or a credit card, and well, Kickoff makes it easy to put credit building on autopilot. Like many of us, I've had periods of my life where my credit score was just awful, and I wasn't sure how to turn things around. It was intimidating. I just hated everything about it. But then I learned how easy and fast it was to boost your credit score with Kickoff. Kickoff is the #1 credit building app that has helped over 1 million people take control of their credit. Now, whether you have no credit or you're looking to increase your score, it takes minutes to apply, and there's no credit check, no hidden fees, no interest, and plans start at $5 a month. And every on-time payment that you make with Kickoff is reported to the major credit bureaus. Then they see healthy habits, and you see a healthier credit score. You can even set it to auto pay, so you can build credit without even thinking about it. Kickoff has been praised by Forbes and NerdWallet as a smart way to build credit fast. And they've got a 4.9 out of 5-star rating in the App Store with over 44,000 rave reviews. So, okay, what are you waiting for? Let's do this. Apply right now in minutes at kickoff.com to start building better credit. That's KIKOFF.com to build your credit score without the lift. Start today at kickoff.com.
I'm Amy, sex and relationship coach, certified sex educator, and 2022's Sexpert of the Year in the sex toy industry.
And I'm April, VP of Hot Octopus, sex toy mogul, and 2016's Woman of the Year in the sex toy industry. Allow us to introduce you to Shameless Sex, a real talk, informative podcast all about sex and relationships, but with a playful twist.
Want to learn how to eat pussy like a champ, suck dick like a boss,
Yeah.
how to better communicate, connect with, and touch lovers and partners? Or maybe you just want to be the master baiter of your own sexual pleasure.
Shameless Sex releases episodes weekly and features accredited doctors, authors, therapists, and educators, available on all podcast apps. Just look up Shameless Sex to discover your new best friends when it comes to all things sex and relationships. To learn more, visit shamelesssex.com.
Mom, what does bad cum taste like?
You know when you accidentally burp and you have something come back up from the earlier in the day?
Yeah.
That's what it tastes like, okay?
Oh, no. We host a podcast called Sex Talk with My Mom.
It's not sex with my mom, it's sex talk with my mom,
No
you
one
perv.
thought it was sex with my mom. Just a mom and a son chit-chatting about sex.
Not just sex, uncomfortable conversations.
Our goal is to make the uncomfortable comfortable. Here are some clips from our show. What I would prefer is like a very intimate connection. I would prefer fucking
God.
phone sex or
Why
video
don't you go
sex.
watch The Notebook and get off? If you look at the picture in a certain angle, it looks like I have like a bulge in my
Underwear?
pussy area.
You want to have?
You're very
You want to
opinionated.
have weed sex? I don't care.
You talking about this stuff with your mom is so weird. That's why we do this.
Check out Sex Talk with My Mom.
Wherever you listen to podcasts and also on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube.
Mom, check out Sex Talk with My Mom.
They say, do the work. That is the work. That's the work you have to do. So that's all I'm going to say on that. Let's keep going with the steps of grooming. So we've had targeting the person, they're vulnerable, yada, yada. Number 2, we've had there is an inappropriate relationship with these skewed power dynamics. And in kink, they're consensually skewed power dynamics. And in an unhealthy relationship, it can be hard to tell what really is consensual and what isn't, and where the two worlds bleed together, and that gray area. And then number 3 is gaining the victim's trust, or I don't like to say victim, target's trust. For many abusers, and again, I'm just reading the thing, establishing trust at this stage is key. They use the flattery trick, offering gifts, attention, sharing secrets, and other means to make them feel that they have a caring relationship while simultaneously training them to keep the relationship a secret. So there's a lot here, because a BDSM relationship is you're putting yourself in a very vulnerable position, and it takes trust on all partners' parts, right? Very deep trust. You experience intimacy in these types of relationships very quickly and very deeply. Maybe like you have never experienced before. It is fucking life-changing. It is like soul-shattering, but in the best way. Like you are like the colors are brighter, right? Like everything is great. Your orgasms are amazing, whatever it is, right? So that's a lot of trust. And then think about, again, we're going to the stereotype, right? A lot of times when we've got the cis male dom, AFAB, S-type, there's a lot of I'm authoritarian. That's like my job as a dom, but I also care about you. I take care of you. Like you're my pet. You're my, I treasure you. I blah, blah, blah. Or maybe I'm mean and authoritarian, but I'm doing it because I'm playing the role of a dom, and I'm doing it for your own good because I care about you. So there's all of that stuff. Number 4 is fulfilling a need. The abuser seeks to fill a void in the person's life, offering a listening ear. It can also involve persuading the victim that the abuser alone can fulfill their need. Again, think about, I've just gotten into a BDSM relationship. I don't know any other doms. You are giving me something that I didn't even know existed, that I don't even know. Are you the only one that can give it to me? I don't know. I've never met anyone like you before. Like you are my fucking world right now. Then we have isolating the victim or target, which is classic. You see this in so many, lists of signs of an abusive relationship. Classic abuser technique. Abusers do this by putting themselves between the victim and their loved ones or caregivers. As a result, they may be reluctant to meet or speak to friends or family. A lot of folks, when they're in BDSM, they have to compartmentalize their life because there's a lot of judgment. Maybe someone who's in kink, maybe they have a friend or two that knows, right? Maybe they don't. They're already isolated. Who are they, right? Who are they going to, are they going to go, I'm going to put on Facebook, I was my dom and, I said my safe word and blah, 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 blah. And then all your friends can chime in honey, that's not right. No. So we don't really have anybody to talk to. This is why I advise folks, especially getting into the community who are new, make friends. When you go to that munch, don't go to that munch to find a play partner. Go to that munch to make some friends, some like-minded friends. Because when you get into a situation, they can be help you put your head, screw your head back on straight. Be like, that's not normal. Don't let that person tell you that's normal and that's the way things are. Don't let them tell you that submissives have to earn their safe words and they can be taken away as punishment. That is not how this works. If you have nobody to talk to that or talk to about that, how the hell are you going to know? And then the end stage is abuse. At this stage, the abuse itself begins. It can involve like assault within the, like sexual assault within the relationship. It could be forced criminal activity, violence against others. Like it could be all sorts of things, like the classic sort of grooming we think of, right? Or it could just be like, haha, now you're mine, right? Whatever it is. Now you're stroking my ego. Or now, I don't know, I have someone to take my shit out on. I have somebody to blame when I'm feeling awful because I haven't addressed my trauma and I lash out. Could be lots and lots of reasons, and oftentimes a reason that that person doesn't even know. And the sixth and final stage, maintaining control. So once you've got that, it's like, it can go years, it can go decades, it can go, for forever. Like I said, I wasn't in a relationship. It wasn't a BDSM one, but it was, similar, but we didn't really have rules or, and for the longest time I was like, no, everything's cool. I'm cool. I consent to this. It's fine. Like, and then I was like, oh my God. Like once I had my light bulb go on, I looked back at how many ever years and I was like, oh, this has been so fucked up for so long. What was I thinking? Oh my God. Was I lying to myself? My perspective was skewed? Like what? Again, it's never the target's fault. Never, 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 never. But it's like, a lot of us can relate to having that like wake up light bulb moment of like, what was I, what? And that is what they take advantage of, right? And it's like the maintaining control. Maybe there's consequences. Maybe there are threats. Maybe all sorts of things, right? And in a, let's say, vanilla relationship where this is going on, oftentimes it might not be like a direct, like, if you do this, I will do that. But it's more kind of subtle under the radar. Right? If you do that, then that person will do this, even though it wasn't explicitly said. It's not as obvious, but what the consequences would be. Well, in kink, we're consenting to having punishments and consequences. And again, if we don't know the difference between like, when should our autonomous self grab the wheel? And when should it like take a nap in the back seat and be like, have fun, kinky play self, go knock your socks off. If our autonomous self is like, we didn't even bring them in the car ride and we went on a kinky road trip, they're not even there to save our asses. Yeah, that's a problem. So yeah, when we talk about grooming in kink, this is oftentimes what we mean. And I don't want to give the impression that this happens like in kink. Oh my God, everyone's an abuser. Oh my God. No, you know what? This happens in all sorts of situations, vanilla scenarios. Like this is part of being a person in the world with other people, and some of those people aren't the healthiest emotionally, and we risk getting into a relationship of one form or another with that person. It could be romantic. It could be a work relationship. It could be a friendship. There's all sorts of scenarios. And this kind of grooming can happen in many, many, many different contexts. The thing about kink is there's like a built-in for, I don't have to hide the fact that I'm asserting my power and my control over you. I can be out in the open with it. I don't have to hide the fact that if you do this, that will be the immediate consequence, because that's the rules. The only thing I have to do is take advantage of the fact that a lot of folks in kink don't know where their fantasy kink self begins and or ends or whatever, and where they're fully autonomous, like protect yourself is. And it's not clear cut. Like there's a like overlappy gray area. Like it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. It's hard. Even for me, right? It's hard. We're human. Nothing we do is easy, especially with our emotions. So this is, like I said, to plant a seed to go, interesting. Okay. Let me look at some of these relationships that maybe I'm in or red flags that I might see or whatever through a different lens. So we're all more aware. You never know what that can help you avoid or even can help you avoid within yourself. Because like I said, even though I use the scenario of dominant cis male and submissive woman, that is not the only scenario. This can happen to anybody or by anybody. And like I said, abusers aren't like, hi, I'm an abuser. I'm going to keep it a secret. And this is my master plan for today. No, like if you talk to abusers, oftentimes they genuinely are like, what the fuck? I'm not doing anything. It's everybody else. It's not me. Like, and they mean it. Like they don't realize it. Listener, have you thought of the possibility that could be you? We're all quiet. That was like a sobering moment, but all of us have violated somebody's consent. And I don't mean in like some, grand criminal way. We're not all 100% perfect, good all the time. We're not all 100% bad all the time. We fuck up. We do bad shit without even realizing we're doing it. And any of us can do that. And so bring it full circle. This is one of the reasons that I so heavily stress that kink is customizable. Because out in the mainstream, there are these very like cookie cutter, black and white, one-dimensional rules that the way they're presented to us don't take any critical analysis. They don't take any understanding of nuance. It's just like, well, this is supposed to be that all the time. Guess what? Nope. There is not one rule in kink that is a universal rule all the time. The only universal rule is we need to have consent, but there is also no universal way or one true way or one right way to go about establishing that consent. That's all customizable too. So it's kind of like when you're approaching kink, and especially if you're new and you know nothing about this world, it's like in school when the teacher's like, your final project is to write a 15-page paper on anything you want. And you're like, what? Are you going to give us a choice? Are you going to give us like a general topic? Like, they're like, no, anything. And you're like, fuck, I don't even know where to begin. Like, what the fuck? What do you mean everything? Like, what? So that's how it is getting into kink or even being in kink. It's like, we have no starting point. We don't even know what our possibilities are. How are we supposed to discern this makes sense versus, ooh, this could be kind of damaging or unhealthy? So I have a bunch of frameworks. I'll just pull one up really quick here and walk you quickly through it. And I'm going to make this into a flow chart. I have directional issues though. And I tried to put it in a flow chart and I was like, oh God, this arrow needs to point to that. If you answer yes, then go here. If you answer no, and it was a mess. So this will be in the book and I'm currently making a workbook page for it right now, or a flow chart page. So to figure out what rule that I come across in kink can I break? Right? It takes a little bit of analysis. So this breakable rule analysis is how to discern what is a best practice. So a best practice that we'll just like go over real quick is one is the sub has all the power. You'll hear that a lot. Sub has all the power. The sub has all the power. The sub has all the power. Of course, like why wouldn't a sub have all the power? Right? And then you hear some people go, what the fuck? That's unhealthy. That's what Why? You're trying to take power away from the sub. First of all, this is not something we could look at as like black and white. Like either the sub has all the power, none of the power. One person has the power, the other one doesn't. Can we all have the power? And then what is the power? What do we mean when we say power? That's a big word. Is that like control over the scene? Is that really right? So in order to break this down, there's like 3 pieces to be like, okay, 1, what issue is that rule attempting to address or solve, right? That's like a common universal issue. 2, are there any variables or circumstances that have changed since that rule was made, or that we're collectively now becoming aware of more? There's more awareness around something new that wasn't when the rule was made. And then 3, if we're still going and we're like, yeah, it's still a valid rule, how can that rule be updated or customized to serve us right now and not inadvertently be damaging in a way that we didn't mean? So let's break that down. What's this rule attempting to solve? That it is common in kink communities, and this is like goes way back to like the 80s when like the community as we know it right now was just being formed, and you know we were just coming up with our early consent models like SSC. There wasn't a lot of awareness around this stuff, and so they didn't want people coming into kink thinking that it's just a free-for-all and they can do whatever the fuck they want. They didn't want, it was their way of kind of explaining like how I explained the autonomous self, like the kink dimensions. You have the autonomous self and then you have the play self. It was their way of sort of addressing like you still have control even though you're in a situation where you've consensually given up control. And that's a good thing because people were either purposely or inadvertently taking advantage of that, and it was creating unhealthy situations and non-consensual situations and abuse and blah, 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 right? Okay, cool. That's cool. Let's keep going. So like, then, you know, there's other things we can ask ourselves about the rule, but I'm not going to get into teaching this whole framework. But anyway, when you get the flow chart, you can see it. So we determine like this rule exists for a valid reason, like a good fucking reason. It is preventing abuse, bad stuff. Cool. Let's keep going. So now what's different? You know, when that rule was a thing and everyone was like, cool. And now people are like, that's not cool. Why are they saying it's not cool? What has changed? What's changed is our awareness of the unintended consequences of that rule started to become one-sided and impinge on the person who was a dominant in a scenario, and they started becoming like kink dispensers. Well, if you're a dominant, you don't get any say in what you like to do, what you don't like to do. I'm the submissive. I have all the power. I have all the control. You're going to be my kink dispenser and do what I want. And this is a 2-way relationship. We need to mutually consent to things. So it's like, okay, inadvertently, the dominant's wants and needs were getting like stepped all over, and they're, you know, was pushing their autonomous selves in the back seat and just making them like a, you know, service tops basically. And it's like, no, we got to meet in the middle here. So how can we change this rule to still uphold the spirit of why it was why it was created, but to compensate for this like new unintended consequence that's, you know, come up since this rule has become popularized? The way I do it, and again, kink is customizable. You can think of this any way you want. The way I think of it is the sub has all the power over their own autonomy. Because that, to me, that's the reminder of like, you got your autonomous self in the back seat and you could pull your autonomous self up to the front seat to take the wheel at any time. Don't let somebody tell you that when you have given up your quote power, which we can deconstruct that word all day within the context of a scene or a dynamic or whatever your kink container is, that still does not mean you've given up your autonomy, because your autonomy is what helps you establish or keep your consent. It's that, you know, autonomous self from the back seat, like, hey, you better call your safe word. Call it right now, right? So that's, in a nutshell, the breakable rule analysis. But yeah, that's why I really stress kink is customizable, because we have all these cookie cutter rules and best practices. And a lot of the best practices exist for very good reasons, but they become boiled down to this one-dimensional thing where they lose their nuance. And then when they lose their nuance, there's a bunch of people going, but there's an exception. But wait a minute. And then the people who are doing things for ill intent then twist that exception to their advantage. I'll give you one more example, and then we'll wrap this up. I know your brain's chewing on a lot. Is you don't have to use safe words, right? And when I say that, I don't mean like I'm using no or don't or like plain language as my safe word. In my mind, I still consider that like a safe word. It is a word we've agreed. If I say, you will, we'll stop and whatever. So a lot of folks who are 24/7 dynamics that have been doing it for years upon years upon years are like, no, legit, we don't play with safe words. And I have talked about this in my safe word, like double episode, which was a few episodes back. I'll put it in the description. I'm not going to get into re-explaining it. That is totally legitimate for some people, but that is a very particular, rare circumstance that is usually between partners that have been together for a very, very long time. If you were to examine those dynamics or those relationships, you would uncover a mechanism by which, most, provided they're doing this in a healthy way. I'm not saying everything's, but assuming they're doing this in a healthy way, oftentimes you will uncover a mechanism by which they do have autonomous consent. It's just not something that they traditionally classify as a safe word. Like between them, it could be a look. It could be this subtle little thing that is more of, nonverbal body language territory that anyone watching would never pick up on. But because these people know each other so well, that's their way of signaling. However, it's also risky. We're not great at nonverbal communication. I could give you a look and you don't know what it means. And then we end up in a situation. But we've both, and again, provided this is a healthy dynamic, we've both entered into this knowing those risks and knowing that something can go wrong and really knowing each other, knowing our relationship after, hours upon hours upon hours over years and years and years and years and years of negotiation. This is where we've ended up. So, one of the best practices is like always use a safe word. And then these folks are like, no, that's not true because we don't use safe words. Legit. Like we're both right here. But why is that a best practice? Because like in most situations, it's really risky. It's like super rare. It's like needle in a haystack kind of rare that you'll find folks that like really don't use safe words and everything's like really rock solid in their dynamic. And again, people who have ill intentions, or even maybe not even people who have ill intentions, maybe people that just don't know, honestly don't know, and they have good intentions. They're building their kink upon a faulty framework that like opens the door for abuse to be happening down the line inadvertently, and they don't even realize, it's not all sinister. So yeah, that's why we say everyone should have safe words, right? It's a best practice. It exists for a reason. Then there's one true wayisms that don't exist for any good reason. Like a dominant must always act authoritative, or a dominant can't bottom. Bullshit. Kink is customizable. Do whatever the fuck you want. So there we go. I just thought I would open this year, 2023, with some down and dirty foundations about kink that I think are very relevant to our everyday lives and what we're out there doing as people who are exploring and meeting others. And it's these little things that, maybe they're not so little, they seem little. They're things that we gloss over in our community, because I've mentioned grooming to so many adults in our community, and they're like, grooming? That happens to like little kids with creepy uncles, or that happens to people who are being trafficked, or it happens in workplaces, with friends, with romantic partners, in kink relationships. So chew on that. I would love to hear what y'all have to say about grooming. If this hit a part of your brain that lit up and made you have some realizations, that made you see things in a different light, maybe that made you go, bitch, you don't know what you're talking about. Whatever, like, talk to me. Come visit me on social media. You know where to find me. Until next time, thanks, all American fuckers. Have a good one. Don't be groomy. No, that's a weird way to end it. But yeah, don't be groomy. Okay, bye. Thanks for listening to American Sex. What's that? You want more? Well, you can start by streaming our TV show on Showtime, Sex with Sunny Megatron. Then pop on over to sunnymegatron.com. Everything's there. You can get updates on my new book, check out my sex ed and BDSM workshops, learn how to book me for your organization or for coaching. You know, we also want to hang out with you too, right? So come join our Discord community or follow along on TikTok or Instagram, Twitter, all the social media. I'm Sunny Megatron everywhere. And you can catch Ken on Twitter or tune in to his weekly D&D games on Twitch. If you want to support the show, a great way to do that is simply to tell people about it. Make a TikTok or tweet about your favorite part of this episode. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a review too. And if you're a ride or die American fucker, you're going to want to join our Patreon community. We'll send you official American Fucker stickers, and you'll get a lot more too at patreon.com/AmericanSex. Now, just in case you happen to be one of the few that still has disposable income in this late-stage capitalist hellscape, well, when you're shopping for a new sex toy, BDSM gear, Kink Academy membership, or other things, please patronize our sponsors and affiliates. You'll get a discount, and it helps us too. Win-win. All those links and codes are in our show notes. Thanks, American fuckers. We appreciate the heck out of you. See you next time.